this section is now number 5. It's called Determinants of Economic Development. Again, the original book by Adam Smith on economics, which was published 240 years ago, 1789, The Wealth of Nations, was basically explaining why some nations get rich and why some nations, or most nations, are still relatively poor. So this is essentially what economics, the subject of economics, was all about. Why some economies grow rich and why most are underdeveloped. And from there we have a modern subject today, which is the subject of economic development. For about 50 to almost 100 years, economists forgot what economics was all about. They started into doing formulas and mathematics and all sorts of insane nonsense, except the one thing, which is, hey, how do we grow and develop an economy? Again, what's economic development about? Economic development is about many things. First and foremost, it's GDP, which is the gross domestic product, which is essentially the purchasing power of consumers. In other words, if you work for one day, can you buy one bread, or two breads, or five breads? If you work for one day, can you buy 1 liter of gasoline, or 10 liters of gasoline, or 100 liters of gasoline? So how much money can you buy with your salary or income for one day? And the purchasing power determines what we call in economics standard of living. Let's clarify, because most people incorrectly assume that standard of living and associated with prices. They believe, totally incorrectly, that oh, this country has a higher standard of living by looking at higher prices, and if country has low prices, it's got a low standard of living. That's totally untrue. Standard of living simply means the purchasing power of the average salary, or of the working class, or of the middle class. In other words, if you work, how much you can buy, how much food you can buy, how much electricity you can buy, how many mobiles you can buy. And standard of living should not be confused with the price level. You may have poor countries with a very high price level. You may have very rich countries with a relatively low price level, or prices are relatively low. But you do have some correlation. Countries which are relatively rich, like Switzerland, will have a relatively high price level. And that's where people confuse, oh, Switzerland has a very high standards of living, and they think in terms of prices. Totally incorrect. So GDP is number one. Well, but there are other characteristics. A very important characteristic is education. And how good the education system. Now, education, we don't mean here education is free or education is paid. We mean quality of education. We mean, can a 12-year-old kid read or cannot read? A different way to rephrase the question, what percentage of 12-year-olds can actually read? Is it 10%? Or is it 90%? Or is it close to 99%? A good educational system will have, in this case we call it literacy rate, of 95 to 99%. And a poor educational system will have a literacy rate of 10, 20, 30, 40%. It's going to have a very low literacy rate. Another thing which you are now, as you're studying over here, will be discovering slowly and steadily on your own, is within the education system is critical thinking, the ability to analyze, okay, as opposed to memorize. Many educational systems, especially in Asia and especially in the Middle East, in general, in countries which are designed autocratically, will have a lot of educational system will be based almost entirely on memorization. Students are not encouraged to think, because if they get to think, they might not like the authoritarian regime they live in. So, students just memorize a few basic things, and the educational system degenerates into memorizing a few basic things. You just memorize the names of the last 5 kings, okay? You know, and how glorious they were. And that's pretty much history. There is no history of the neighboring country, and there is no history of other nations. The idea of, let's say, when I was teaching in the Middle East, of any student knowing who Hitler is, they wouldn't. Okay, well, let's say Hitler was a bad man, they wouldn't know who Churchill is. Okay, so they wouldn't know a lot. I mean, they would have no concept or understanding of ancient Rome, or of ancient Greece, or of other ancient societies. So educational systems usually degenerate into mostly government propaganda for the glory of the government, okay? And the educational system is usually designed to service the interest of the governments. And that's how most educational systems outside the developed world or outside Europe are actually designed. So you as Europeans these things would sound weird to you because you don't see these things in Europe, but outside Europe it's almost everywhere around the world like that, okay? Next major part will be, of course, health. It's no good that you're rich, and it's no good that you're smart, it's no good that you're highly educated if you're terribly sick. If you suffer from major diseases like diabetes, or if you got major heart problems, or have a terrible disease with pain like gout, where your joints are in terrible pain, or you have thousands of different diseases, and health is a major determinant of what we call quality of life. Now, I don't want to get into this because this is, of course, a whole different subject, a whole different field, but you got so-called poverty diseases, diseases which are based on and driven by poverty diseases, and you got so-called affluent diseases. Diseases which are, in other words, poverty diseases are diseases which are very common in poor countries and very rare in rich countries. And then you got affluent diseases where you got diseases which are very, very common in the rich world and relatively rare in poor countries. Example will be diabetes. Diabetes very common in the rich countries around the world. Heart disease very common in the rich countries around the world. And a lot of rich countries are getting rapidly over the last 20 or 30 years very, very, very poor. One of the sickest countries in the world today is the United States. US people are the most obese in the world. Well, they got beaten by Australia. In other words, Australians are getting very, very, very sick, okay, as they're getting fatter and fatter. You know, fatness means that you go 10, 20 different diseases. Soon enough, you're going to be due for diabetes. If you're fat, you're a lot more likely to get a heart disease, a lot more likely to have brain problems, and a lot more likely to have all sorts of health issues. And of course, the Middle East, Saudi Arabia is the fattest country in the world with the fattest people. But the point is that extreme poverty causes a lot of disease. Well, it goes with a lot of diseases. And as countries grow more and more and more rich, they get a whole lot wealthier. Then, as countries get very rich and very wealthy, they get a lot sicker too. The other example will be UK, United Kingdom people in the UK, the British are very, very sick people. They got all sorts of diseases. These people take a lot of pills, okay? Now, an example of a country which is relatively rich, but relatively healthy, and people live a good, long, relatively healthier life will be France. French people will be relatively healthy. Italians will be relatively healthy. Greeks will be relatively unhealthy. It's a little tricky, the causality. Which one causes which? Is it that people are really lazy, and because they are lazy they get fat and sick? Or is it because they are relatively unhealthy, they become relatively lazy? Okay, so is it sickness makes people lazy, or is it laziness make people sick? Is very tricky. But as countries get progressively richer and richer, they get a whole lot more sick, suffering from these so-called modern diseases. And this is where here the determinant factor is culture. Culture will determine a lot whether a rich country will be relatively healthy or relatively poor. Canadians try to be relatively healthier, but they are still very unhealthy. Okay, so you actually get most rich countries around the world are actually very, very, very sick. And of course, part of the culture is if you're sick, you take a pill, and the pill is going to solve your problem. Well, of course, pills don't solve problems, okay? A pill will never solve a health problem, okay? A health problem will be solved with a healthy lifestyle, healthy living, not with a pill. And if you go to a doctor, a surgery, come on guys, enough guys, okay? Enough, separate, I mean, you just keep talking at kindergarten, okay? If you guys get a business, just go outside, you know. Go outside, take care of your business outside. You got anything more interesting, fine, you know, you don't have to be in here. But I can't just keep talking, right? Okay. This is not what you're supposed to do in here, okay? Right? That's not why you're in here, okay? So, back to culture. Culture is a major determinant of health, okay? All right? And health can determine also culture, too. Richness can determine health, and so on. Let's see what else we got in here within part of growth. Okay, standard of living. I covered that one. Education, I got this covered. Okay, so what will be a measure of health? Measure of health number one, which is not quite correct, but they like to use it because it's easy to measure. Easy to measure is longevity. What is the average life of a person? Do people live on average 77 years, or 75, or 68? So, how long was the average lifespan? One of the highest in the world will be actually in Japan. The Japanese will live a very long life. Okay? Now, longevity is actually a very poor measure for a different reason. You may have a lot of advanced economies where people in their 60s, let's say 55 or 60 or 65, are going to be very, 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 very sick. And as they are very sick, the healthcare system will support their life where they're going to continue to live a few more years of extremely miserable life. You're a diabetes, and if you got a diabetes, you will soon after that lose your leg. They're going to cut your leg, one or maybe both legs, okay? So you won't be able, your quality of life is going to be terrible. You can suffer some brain damage where, you know, you're going to be out of your mind, okay? So it's going to be a terrible quality of life. But they can extend it for 3, for 5, for 7, for 10, for 12 years. And it's going to provide an artificial measure where it would appear that people are living a lot longer, and in a number of years they actually are, but the quality of life is a complete disaster, okay? And the reason is that many medical systems are designed to extend life of sick people longer, and the reason is simple. Major businesses can make more money out of sick people than out of healthy people. A lot of healthcare systems have the perverse incentive of keeping people sick instead of keeping them healthy, okay? Because if you keep them sick, you can make more money out of them and out of the government. Here, as I talk with a lot of local people in Thailand, and then we mention about, you know, how much money the healthcare system makes out of certain diseases, they immediately respond, 10 out of 10, no, we don't pay anything for it, it's free. Well, the answer is, it is not free. It cannot be free. It is never free. It is free for you because you don't pay when you go to the doctor, but the government pays for it, and the government pays for it well. So it is actually, it is that the government pays, and the healthcare system gets a lot richer. For example, by maintaining for a longer period of time diabetes as opposed to curing it, okay? So the healthcare system profiteers big time, and the healthcare system prefers that the government pays directly to them. So you got to be extremely careful about health and health measures, because sometimes a health measure would indicate, oh, they're doing very well, when in reality they are very, very, very sick people. Let's see what else we got. Human development income, okay. The other measure is called life expectancy at birth. If you're born in Kenya, now you expect them to live about 45 years. If you're born in Germany, you're expected to live 75 years. Okay? Again, it's a good measure because it's based on statistics, but it does not provide the quality of health. It simply assumes that if you live longer, you'll be healthier, which is totally untrue. Okay? Political economic progress. Okay. So, these are some of the parts of economic development. Now I'm continuing with economic development. Economic development depends a lot on innovation. You need innovation for economic development. Innovation will include the introduction, again, of new products or new processes. No innovation. Without innovation, the economy will be fundamentally stagnant. It will not grow well. And innovation requires relatively free economy. Innovation is almost impossible or choked in totalitarian type systems, okay, in command economy. You need a free economy for innovation. Innovation will also mean a lot of new businesses, a lot of business growth and all the other things. Innovation will usually, but not always mean, high-skilled jobs. Example of the opposite will be a little post-it note. You know those little post-it notes, these yellow little notes? You put it up and you put it on the board. This is a low innovation. You just got a little special glue, and usually does not result in a high skill. But most innovation would usually mean very high skilled job. Like smartphones, they would definitely mean a lot of high skilled jobs. A recent innovation, just 3-4 years old, will be the tablet. The iPad will be the first one. That remains a lot of new technology, a lot of new high-skilled jobs. Another innovation will be all sorts of medical devices for scanning and for analyzing, for blood tests and all sorts of things, and they will involve a lot of high-skilled jobs. So innovation usually goes hand with high technology, with high-skilled jobs, and high-skilled jobs means also highly paying jobs. Now a lot of innovation is driven in Germany on highly efficient cars that run on diesel, now on hybrids, and all sorts of everything related to car efficiency, meaning getting more miles per liter of diesel or per liter of gasoline. Next piece, which is extremely important, is entrepreneurship. An entrepreneur is a person who attempts to begin a new business or to implement a new idea and try to make money out of it, try to make profit out of it. In other words, for profit. It could be as simple as open a restaurant, which is not a new idea, but it's still a new. So the main idea of an entrepreneurship is a new business. And if an economy, if a government, if the culture encourages entrepreneurships, you will have a lot of new businesses born. Of course, many of those businesses will go bankrupt and shut down, but at least you're going to have a lot of new businesses. And with a lot of entrepreneurship, you're going to have a lot more vibrant economy. The economy will keep opening new businesses, will keep attracting and creating new jobs. And many of these will remain, they will survive, and many of them will actually grow. So entrepreneurship is extraordinarily important for an economy. Now, one of the most entrepreneurial people in the world will be the Chinese. Chinese will go anywhere in the world and they'll immediately begin opening businesses. Chinese will come to Thailand, well they did many decades ago. They're going to be open tons of businesses and we're going to be running a lot of it. They're going to go to the Philippines and a lot of businesses, well historically have been run by Chinese. You're going to go to the US and they're immediately going to be opening businesses and so. So Chinese, they go no matter what and they don't get a job. These are very entrepreneurial by nature. Entrepreneurship is very, very much determined by culture. And many cultures encourage entrepreneurship and other cultures just don't. People don't want to risk anything. They just want to get a job, okay? And that's not exactly good for the overall economic health, growth, and development. Okay, so let's write me back what innovation is about. Innovation is about new products. Number 2, new processes. Let's get a few more. New organizations. So example of an innovation will be McDonald's. Yeah, you don't really have a new product, but you somehow have a new business process, a new business structure. new business organization and new business structure, and here new management practices. New management practices. Now, management uses a new method for cost control. Or in Japanese, in the US, when you have a product line, the product line will keep running, and an employee cannot stop the product line because everyone else got to stop. In Japan, if you're an employee, you see something's wrong with a product, you stop the product line, you fix it, and then you let it run. So this is a management practice, and in general, how you control the process. You may actually give more control to the employees, or you may control it electronically. Again, but a new management practice, new structure, or new organization of production or a business could be a fundamental innovation that can change business profoundly, can lead to what's called a completely new business model. Of course, a simple innovation right now is that little camera which we use today in education. In this case, we don't use it to make money out of it. We just use it to increase, hopefully, the quality of education, both for you and for many people around the world. Let's see what else we got. We're close to finishing, yes. Yeah, section number is going to be the next one. 6. States in transition. Page 66. It's better, or at least it sounds a little nicer to say transition economies. My home country, Bulgaria, is a transition economy. Romania is a transition economy. Most of Eastern Europe, European economies are transition economies or economies in transition. Most of Central Asia, which were the former 14 republics of Russia, Soviet Union has 15 republics, 14 of them, many of them separated out, so they are new economies, new countries. They are in transition. And part of the transition process is, number one, I'm not going to talk a lot about it, is the spread of democracy. Supposedly, many of these countries move to democracy. Well, in most of these countries, democracy is not real, but at least people get to vote. People get to think that there is an actual democracy when in reality there isn't. They think they can change things with elections, but in reality nothing really changes, as we can see. Yeah, minor changes have been observed in Poland. Minor changes have been observed in good changes in Slovenia, maybe in Slovakia. But as you move further and further east, changes are very, very few or practically no changes. And a lot of times things have changed for the worse. It hasn't been much of a democracy anyway, especially in those Central Asian countries like the Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and so on. In general, there hasn't been too much of a democracy. Kazakhstan will be another one of them. All right. Of course, they divide the countries into free, into partly free, and I don't want to discuss all of those things. Let's see what else we have. So, states in transition will also include privatization. They say, oh, the government privatized certain government enterprises. What the privatization actually did was transfer these government productive assets to, let's call it the local mafia or the local elite or the former communists. They basically stole these enterprises, or these enterprises were sold really cheaply to Western companies, to American companies, to British companies, to European companies, and when they were sold cheaply, when the Western company buys it cheaply, it will pay back multi-million-dollar bribes to the government that sold it to them. So say, okay, well, let's say our Bulgarian telecommunications company was estimated to be worth $1 billion US. It got sold for 50 million, okay? And the buyer will say, okay, we'll sell it to you for 50 million, but you're going to give me a 50 million bribe, and you're going to deposit it in our Swiss bank accounts. And the company says, sure, no problem. We pay 50 bribe, 50 for the price. We get for $100 million, we got a company which is worth 10 times more. They get the company, and as soon as they get the company, what do they do with it? They sell it again for 200,000. Sorry, for 200 million. When they sell it for 200 million, what's the result? Hey, you made a fantastic investment. You put in $100 million, and within a few months later or a year later, you doubled your money for 200 million. But that's an extraordinary accomplishment, okay? And the new buyer who bought it for 200 million is very, very happy because he's still got a company that is worth $1 billion, supposedly, okay, 5 times more. So everyone is happy in the process, except that the people are the biggest losers. And most of these transition processes, where it's democracy, the democracy is mostly fake. Where you got privatization, the property is either stolen or the people literally suffer. So the people don't get to benefit much out of it. It's the local elite, whether it's the political elite or the business elite, gets to profit from it. We got some stuff about New World Order, market-based system. Okay, you got a lot of new countries moving in now. China has been, of course, in transition for the last 20 years. You also got Vietnam is moving rapidly and steadily into a transition. They're trying to democratize as much as they can. They're trying to privatize as much as they can. Another key piece over here, because I missed it, is, let's call it deregulate. Deregulate becomes deregulation. The government loosens the control over the economy. You don't require as much. It's relatively easy to open business. So there's an overall deregulation in the economy. You can get to buy property, you can get to sell property, and things like that. We're talking with some of the guys about experience. All right, let me draw a little picture. Let me see how I'm going to draw. I don't remember exactly well. This is what the map of Bahrain looks like, okay? And you will have one special area, and this special area is open for purchases by foreigners. So if you're a foreigner, you can buy only in this area. It is well-known area. It's like area number 1 in Bahrain. It's called Jufair, okay? So you can go and actually buy yourself an apartment. You can actually go and open a business. You can do whatever. I mean, it's a relatively free economic area. Well, guess what? Jufair is very, very, very prosperous. The area is very rich. You got a lot of businesses. You got a lot of... The whole thing is extraordinary. And it is a totally different world within the rest of Bahrain. Okay? So here's a simple example where you deregulate a specific area, you allow foreigners to open businesses, you allow foreigners just to buy a house or to buy an apartment, or foreigners to build real estate. So you deregulate a specific area, and that area gets extraordinarily prosperous. So it is well known and it is well proven that deregulations usually result in a significant improvement of standard of living. In overall, again, entrepreneurship. Deregulation goes hand in hand with entrepreneurship. You deregulate, you're going to encourage entrepreneurship, you're going to encourage innovation, you're going to encourage investment. So deregulation is very important, and what most economies in transition have attempted and tried these three things. Okay, I think up to here is good enough for today. Next time we finish. All right?